Welcome to Tracks to Success, brought to you by Presentation Partners. This is the podcast that brings you inspiring people and their inspiring stories. How did they find their way to the top, and how can their path help you do the same? Here's your host, network broadcaster, executive, and entrepreneur, Kraig Kann.
Right now, on this edition of Tracks to Success, a familiar face in the financial space who deserves a ton of credit for learning how to manage her own before becoming a sought-after expert helping others. A television anchor, she found her way to the network at the youngest of ages and has truly cashed in, turning business entrepreneur and going from daily bright lights to very bright ideas that she's published in multiple books and magazines and talked about on multiple shows, stages, and content platforms, including those through her own production company. This female financial power broker might not be able to show you the money, but with stints on CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, Bloomberg, and Steve Harvey's show, just to name a few, she's teaching women how to handle it. Her toughest challenge in helping others manage money? Probably managing her time. Because after once nearly going broke herself, she's now going mad with business opportunities. Her name is Nicole Lapin, entrepreneur, speaker, and author of bestsellers Rich Bitch and Boss Bitch and Becoming Superwoman. Her inspiring story and this edition of Tracks to Success starts now. Nicole, this is awesome. Totally thrilled to spend some time with you. Thank you so much. For our listeners out there, full disclosure, we crossed paths back in the television days, and I'll explain how in just a little bit, but I think Nicole's kind of graduated. I'm using the term graduated, Nicole, because you've done so many things since we did do a little television bit together, and I'm very impressed, which is why I want you on this podcast. So I start out with a huge thank you. Really appreciate the time.
I would always make the time for K Squared.
I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Very kind. Now, the challenge of this podcast for me, and believe me, I faced some challenges with this thing, was where do I start? Because there are so many things I want to talk to you about that I get excited about. So I could start in a certain spot. I know where I want to start. But if you were going to start this thing, if you were sitting in my chair and you were going to interview Nicole Lapin, where would you start? What would be the first thing that you would want to get out there for the public to know about you?
Oh, I don't wish that on anyone. So if you know where to start, Kraig, that is more than any man has in the history of the world. I cannot wait to find out where that is.
Okay, then I know exactly where I'm starting. You've written 3 books. I don't want to talk about the first 2. I want to talk about the most recent one, which is called Becoming Superwoman. That is a really cool title. The other 2 are even cooler, which I'll get to, but Becoming Superwoman. What's the mission with that? What made you want to put that out there, and what's behind it that's tied to Nicole Lapin?
So Becoming Superwoman is a 12-step plan to go from burnout to balance. And all of my books are 12-step plans because, like many 12-step recovery programs, the first step is admitting you have a problem. And I think that is the hardest step oftentimes. And I think, as you know, a lot of women try to be Superwoman, the character, the one-word version, because there's a space, a very intentional space in my book title. And that space allows for the woman to put her oxygen mask on first before helping others. And becoming Superwoman, that one-word version, is unsustainable. I think a lot of women try to do it all and be all things to all people. So ultimately, she's nothing to herself. And that's how I felt. And that compelled me to try and share my story for other women who were struggling with burnout or breakdown, and realize that it's actually the biggest asset or liability. I think self-care is the biggest asset or liability in your career. And I've talked about career and finances for 2 decades, I believe. So, beyond the negotiating, beyond all the tricks of the trade, if you are not taking care of yourself, nothing else matters.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Doesn't matter male or female. You got to think about yourself, be healthy, be happy, and then help others. Let's toss out some cool things people probably don't know about Nicole outside of all those fun things I shared in my fancy little open before we started this. I'm going to rip through them and see which one really sticks to you. And you go, yeah, I'm proud of that. Number one, valedictorian of your class at Northwestern. I mean, we're talking about Northwestern here. That's cool.
Well, that and 350 will get me a soy latte when my lattes again in this world. So it hasn't really helped me in my life. It just proves that I have always been a complete nerd. And maybe that's why I'm single, because I didn't go to college parties and I've rewritten financial dictionaries in the back of my books.
Nah, whatever. You've got that on your resume. That's pretty solid. A judge in the Miss America pageant 2016? Really?
For real. I always wanted to do this, and I wanted to ask the smarty pants questions. Miss America is the biggest scholarship organization for women. It's not the Trump one. That's Miss USA. And I loved my experience there. I had a motorcade, a police escort for an entire week in Atlantic City, because those folks are really intense from different states, by the way. They will try to bribe each other. Having a police escort was definitely something I'll never forget, in addition to everything else there.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. I'd put that on the list. First female ever to win Money Idol of the Year. Now, you beat out Tony Robbins and Dave Ramsey for this thing.
Dude, it's Money Idol of the Year. It's not American Idol. It's like the Nerd Olympics. Yeah, I don't know if that's something that I'm definitely going to put out on my dating app.
But you'd beat Dave Ramsey and Tony Robbins. I mean, that's a big deal. Those are two big, heavy hitters. Come on, you got to put that higher. Here, how about this one then? Maybe this will get you excited. I'm going to throw two together at once here. New York Observer once voted you the #1 bachelorette in the New York City media. Now, if that's not cool enough, I'm not talking about The Bachelor and The Bachelorette show, the series, but that is really cool in a big city like that. Or maybe it's the fact that you were on the Golf Channel once upon a time. Which one of those is cool?
The Golf Channel. I was very shocked when they told me I was going to be on the Golf Channel. I was so confused because it was when Comcast and NBC merged. And I was just like, wow, I don't know about any of this golf stuff, but I'll go on and talk about the Dow, I guess. And it became one of my most favorite TV things that I've done in the last couple decades, because I started on the air when I was 15 years old.
Yeah. It was fun, and you were very good, and it gave us something. Look, the audience of the Golf Channel is a lot of people that care about the market, and you delivered it very well. A lot of bubbly enthusiasm at 7 o'clock in the morning. That was very impressive. Now, let's go way back, all right? Let's talk childhood, because clearly you've got an amazing resume. Where did Nicole grow up? And were you always destined for all this cool stuff when you were a kid? Did you feel like you were that type of kid that was that driven?
Oh my gosh. So we're going back to the womb, it sounds like. I grew up in Los Angeles, and no, I was destined to become a homeless crack addict in an alleyway. I definitely was not destined for making it in business, much less being in business, for sure. I grew up in an immigrant family, so first generation American, super broken home, never had the Wall Street Journal on the kitchen counter, never talked about stocks or bonds or any of that stuff. Didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth growing up. Some people have assumed that. I barely had a spoon with food in my mouth growing up at all. Actually, my father died of a drug overdose when I was 11, and I never really thought that I was going to make much of my life. And I was dealt a terrible hand. I played it the best I could, and I won way bigger than I ever expected. And I just needed a job. Like, I didn't want to be in finance. I hated finance. My boyfriend in high school said he wanted to be a hedge fund manager, and I thought the dude wanted to be in gardening. So, like, I definitely didn't think I was going to go on to write Rich Bitch or Boss Bitch or like be on CNBC or Bloomberg or, the Golf Channel talking about what was going on in the markets. I just was offered a job in business news, and I lied and said that I knew about business news because I needed a job, and I faked it till I made it. And the rest is history.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Now, what I found out was that you started television at like in your teenage years, back in high school, cable access and stuff. And then, like everybody else, you went to a journalism school. I say like everybody else. Not everybody went to a good journalism school like Northwestern. And then all of a sudden, you go to the local markets and play that whole game like a lot of people that get into TV. So with that, what was your big break? Who was the influencer that got Nicole Lapin pushed in the right direction based upon, you know, a childhood that you say didn't set you up for greatness?
Wow, I think it was a mosaic of a bunch of different people. Yeah, I, like a lot of teens, angsty teens, wanted to figure out where I belonged, and I thought maybe I would be a dancer. I went to a performing arts high school. I was a dance major, like the fame school. Then I wanted to be a poet and be a writer and sit under a tree. And then I was like, oh wow, I have to probably pay bills. So I went into journalism and made less than $20,000 a year. But you know, I ultimately became a writer, just not the kind I expected. And I often say, you know, when entrepreneurial experts will say, go out and do what you love, YOLO, FOMO, whatever, just burn your corporate bra. I'm like, well, I didn't really have the luxury to go do what I loved, but I figured out how to love what I did. And I became a writer, just not the kind I expected.
You worked on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Was that the thing that did get you hooked, where you said, okay, I kind of do like business, I kind of do like finance, and I could go in this direction? Was that the break?
Well, it was definitely I was 18. It was definitely my first foray into anything about business or money, and it sounded like Chinese to me. It sounded like complete jargon. And what I realized is that money is just a language like anything else. We just don't have a Rosetta Stone for that language. And so I was like, well, I figured out harder things in my life, so I guess I can figure this out. But the truth is, I was super scared and I was super clueless. And so once I could understand the language, I spoke it to the world, and I never would have imagined that, you know, fast forward, I would be teaching anyone else how to speak that language. Like, I'm the least likely person to become a finance anything. And so if I can do it, anyone can do it, really.
Yeah, but you're an expert. And in everything I read, this is what humanizes you. This is what, to me, is the compelling story behind the career. And that is that well before you ever started teaching and helping people manage their money, you had to figure out how to manage your own because you were in trouble. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, I grew up like a lot of first generation American kids using cash only. I didn't know anything about a mortgage or, you know, a credit card or APR or any of that stuff. And when I got my dream job at CNN, I was 21, which is high class problems because you have to keep raising the bar after that, which is a whole other story. And the moral of that story is that external solutions are not helpful for internal problems, because, you know, I think I self-prescribed not drugs or alcohol, but work for many years to hide from a really traumatic upbringing that I ultimately got a PTSD diagnosis for. And I didn't even know that folks who didn't go to war could get that. But while I was trying to medicate with work for so many years, I got a credit card, and I got myself into a whole bunch of debt because I didn't know how to use it. And I figured out how to get out the hard way. And I realized that it's not that complicated. Once you can understand finance and money and stuff like that, like sometimes we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And yeah, if you would go to China, you didn't speak Chinese, you'd be really confused. If you went to Wall Street or the Chicago Merc, or if you got yourself in debt, like you'd be really confused. But then when you can speak the language, you realize it's actually not that complicated. And, you know, it's not that difficult once you actually learn this jargony stuff that I think keeps a lot of people out of the conversation.
So what's the one thing you taught yourself, or the talk you gave yourself, or the message that you learned that helped you pull yourself out of debt to get yourself on the right track to even make this a career?
Well, I broke it down into baby steps. So I think anything overwhelming broken down into baby steps is much more manageable and something that you can tackle much easier. And so that's why again, I wanted to be a poet. I didn't know I was going to write finance books for sure. But when I did, it was after 10 years of trying to get a book deal, 4 false starts, 4 agents, 4 proposals that didn't go anywhere. And I thought it would never happen for me. But once it did, breaking it down into those steps was what actually just helped me. And I think that's what ultimately ended up resonating with other people. I thought Rich Bitch would either be dead on arrival, you can't call a book Rich Bitch and not expect people to have feelings about it, or do really, really well and crush it. And I truly had no idea which way it was going to go. But yeah, thankfully it did the latter. And one book became 2, became 3, and then I just signed a 2-book deal. What is happening? I don't have actual babies, but I've birthed a lot of book babies.
That is so cool. Okay, you've just taken me there. I was going to go there in a little bit, so let's talk about that. The book Rich Bitch, all right? That does elicit emotion. It makes people feel something. Same thing with Boss Bitch, and then the Superwoman book. So let's go back to the first one and the failed opportunities, and all of a sudden it goes out there. The thing sells out on Amazon in like a week, and everybody's all over it. Did you feel you'd arrived?
I was so confused. I did all of this prep behind like the name of Rich Bitch, taking back the word bitch and owning it as a badge of honor. I'd been called a bitch in a derogatory sense throughout my career. And that just meant that I was strong, ambitious, and powerful. And if that meant I was a bitch, then awesome, I'm a bitch and I own that as a badge of honor. But like nobody really cared about that part. And I think it was the first time that this finance space that was typically really boring and stodgy was disrupted. And I didn't even know that that's what I was doing at the time. I didn't know, like, I'm going to disrupt the personal finance section of the bookstore. Like, no, I just wrote what I thought I would have wanted as I taught myself how to get my own financial life together and become a financial reporter and anchor. And then I ultimately went on to get all those alphabet soup certifications. I was like, I would want this. And so, yeah, when it sold out, when it hit the New York Times bestseller list, like, it was as much of a shock to me as it probably was to my publisher who, I think in Wall Street and in life, there's 2 truisms. One, buy low, sell high, and the other that it's better to beat low expectations. So I definitely beat low expectations.
You've definitely done that. You just talked about the alphabet soup. So let's go through your TV career a little bit. And we'll get back to the book in just a minute. 2005 CNN Headline News. You helped them launch the 24-hour live stream situation for them. CNN International, then off to MSNBC, CNBC, NBC, the Today Show. Then Bloomberg is in the mix as well for you. I mean, you have had, Nicole, an amazing set of platforms from which to grow. What did you learn about yourself with all of the shows that you did and the people that you interviewed? We're talking Fortune 500 CEOs. I mean, you've been there. What did you learn about yourself with all of that?
Sounds like I get around, Kraig. I think I learned that it takes a while to become really comfortable in your own skin. And that's a journey in life. It's a journey on television. And when I started, I wanted to have all this like faux gravitas where I cut my hair really short in a little anchor bob and I lowered my voice and I wore shoulder pads and teased my hair. And I tried to be older and wiser than I was, but the truth was I knew what I was talking about, and I could have long hair and talk to CEOs and politicians and go mano a mano with them. And the only person that was really the enemy of that was myself. And sometimes the biggest enemy is between your ears. And so I had intense imposter syndrome. Like I never thought every day that my badge was going to work at CNN. I would walk in, I'd be like, they definitely are going to figure me out. They're definitely going to just turn off my badge and it's not going to work because like they're going to realize that they made a huge mistake in hiring me. And it always worked. They didn't fire me, and I deserved to be there. And I auditioned along with a bunch of other folks and did all these tests and stuff like that. And I deserved it. I was just the one that had to complete that.
This season, Tracks to Success is proud to have the support of Ahead. They're true innovators of fine headwear, and Ahead's been supplying the most prestigious events and outfitting the world's top golfers for 25 years. And if you're looking to dress for success, Ahead is the perfect brand for you. So think ahead and look for it at pro shops and special events around the country. And here's your chance to save big. Visit aheadusashop.com now and use the code TTSPOD. That's TTSPOD and receive 20% off your purchase. Ahead, the finest in headwear, and now the official headwear of the Tracks to Success podcast, available at aheadusashop.com. We're talking with author, TV anchor, entrepreneur, Nicole Lapin. I want to have some fun with a couple of other things that are tied to your TV career, because in the midst of all that reporting and finding out what it was like to be in front of those bright lights and teasing your hair and all the things that you just talked about, you've reported on U.S. budget woes before, right? You've been right there in the midst of the economy and sharing all those things. So talk to me about where we are in the United States. Are you a glass half full or glass half empty on the State of the Union when it comes to dollars and cents?
Well, I think that the only thing we can control is ourselves. We can't control the global economy. We can't control any of the madness happening with the pandemic or the stock market. We can only control ourselves and our own little economies. And I think now is a better time than ever to learn the language of money if you haven't learned it already. And like again, the least likely person to speak the language of money, much less speak it to the world. Like I didn't learn it. My family definitely like only used cash in a nefarious way. Definitely never like the upstanding, history of the stock market. That was nothing we talked about. And, I could have said, wow, well, woe is me. I didn't learn it. We don't learn this in school. We learn a lot of BS stuff like the Pythagorean theorem, how to dissect a frog. And I could be like, well, I didn't learn it, so I'm just going to bury my head in the sand. No, I think it's a combination of forgiving your former self for what he or she didn't know, and then moving forward, saying that that's not okay moving forward, and that I can do better. And listen, if you learn this stuff growing up, amazing. If you have a trust fund, like I'm not mad at you. I'm really jealous of you. I would totally take a trust fund. But if you didn't, like you're never as young as you are today, if not now, then when? And this is a great time to learn the things that may have scared you. And once you do, you realize that they're actually not that scary.
You talked about Bloomberg Television, and we know tied to the markets and finance, hosted a bunch of things there, interviewed a bunch of people, entrepreneurs from startups included in that. So think back, who's the most interesting or compelling guy or woman that comes to your mind immediately, right? That you say, wow, I got to sit with them. And I know you've talked to the head founder of LinkedIn and Zappos and other places as well. But what jumps right to the front of Nicole's mind?
Oh my gosh, as somebody who is an amazing entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I really loved, it's not an entrepreneur, but I loved the governor of Montana, a guy named Brian Schweitzer at the time. He invited me to his ranch in Montana. And I was doing a governor's series around like how the states were broke and they were running a surplus. And I was just so impressed. He spoke Arabic. He Like, I was so thoughtful about the economy and the state of the state. He was this rising star in the Democratic Party, and I got a fly fishing license while I was there. He taught me how to fly fish. He taught me how to, throw knives. It's actually the only time I've ever gotten tackled by Secret Service. We were like messing around with tasers because we were on this ranch. There's no service or like electricity or anything. And so we were all just hanging out, and they were showing me how to do these things that I had never learned before growing up in LA. And we were messing around with tasers, and I thought I was being really cute and being like, I'm Charlie's Angels. And I sort of like pointed it in the governor's direction, and I totally got tackled. They were like, it's all fun and games until you point a taser in the governor's direction, and then we're not friends. So definitely a memorable experience for a lot of reasons.
You've talked to entrepreneurs. Bottom line is you are one. And when did you kind of get comfortable with that and think, I can own this? I, Nicole Lapin, am my own brand, and I'm going to put it out there comfortably. When?
Wow. So I never really calculated how I would build this brand, because a lot of people will ask me, how they can build something similar. And the truth is I made it up as I went along. And I found a market for accessible financial content. Susie Orman was amazing. And while I was at CNBC, she was sort of the voice of financial advice. I worked with her and Jean Chatzky and a lot of amazing personal finance experts, but I felt like it wasn't accessible to me and my generation. The idea of not buying a latte seemed ridiculous. And I was like, well, I actually think that financial advice is fine if you buy a latte and rent instead of buying a house and not buying a latte. I don't think the financial gods are going to come down and get you. So let's try something else. And I tried to really capture that white space, and what I saw was the market. And as it found resonance, I just continued to grow from it. I actually started when I left CNBC, and I left mid-contract because I felt so strongly about this opportunity. And I had a great job and a super sweet salary and all these things. And like, people were very confused. My agent at the time was like, you're ruining your career. This is the worst idea you've ever had, ever. And I was like, well, watch me. And that's what I did. I started with Recessionista. I don't know if you remember this, but it was during the thick of the recession, and I launched recessionista.com. And then a year later, the recession ended, which was amazing for the economy, but terrible for my business. And I thought, wow, okay, well, I tried this entrepreneur thing. I could always go back to TV and work for somebody else. But I pivoted, and that became the basis for Rich Bitch. And, fast forward to this pandemic where everybody's pivoting. I think entrepreneurs and true entrepreneurs will have pivoted a bazillion times before and will continue, pandemic or not.
Season 2 of Tracks to Success is brought to you by Presentation Partners. Presentation Partners is a unique team of award-winning executives helping you build a presentation others will be talking about. Presentation Partners teaches you the true art of storytelling. And if you haven't heard about their neuroscience of persuasion, you'll see how valuable it is to own it. Whether you're a company or an entrepreneur, Presentation Partners is the team you need behind you. For almost 15 years, they've helped clients raise millions in capital and countless dollars in sales simply by making top leaders successful presenters. The time is now to find your authentic voice and learn your authentic story. Presentation Partners, creating persuasive story presentations based on something other than just your good looks. So tell me about this. What was your goal early on? Did you have a specific goal? And were you incredibly nervous? Because you just said you told your boss, hey, guess what? I got this, basically, and I'm going to go do it. Did you have a goal?
My goal was to provide accessible financial content to a mainstream audience. And so I loved being on CNBC and talking to those CEOs and being on the Golf Channel and talking to the audience of, old rich white men. And that's not me editorializing. You know this. That's who's watching the Golf Channel. That's who's watching CNBC. That just wasn't the audience that I wanted to reach. And I was so lucky to be able to reach like the richest, most powerful youth in the country for a long time. But I felt like I wanted to reach my former self, that girl who was smiling and nodding and not joining basic money conversations because she was too freaked out. The girl whose boyfriend dumped her because I couldn't hang out with his Wall Street friends. That's legit. That's a legit story. And I felt like Elle Woods. I was like, okay, well, his Wall Street friends came calling when I was anchoring business news. So I felt vindicated in that. And I thought I could bottle that and I could help other women who are feeling the same fears.
So you felt that women needed what you could offer. Is that fair? Did they need something in your face a little bit? I say that because, look, Nicole, you've been recognized in groups like 30 Under 30, 40 Under 40, and other things. And I don't know specifically why they tabbed you. I don't even know if you know why they tabbed you. But everything you've put out there, including the names of those books, right? Rich Bitch, Boss Bitch, kind of in your face type stuff. It almost seems like you believe that women needed that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I just don't think they knew they needed that. And so I had one big criticism from Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe. And I used to be on their show. I used to do their show and then the Golf Channel and a bunch of NBC stations. And she said, like, I don't know about the title of this book. I like the concept, but I'm not sure about the title. And my answer to that was, I think the ends justify the means. If you could get a woman to pick up a money book who never imagined she picked up a money book, then we are all winning. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make this sneak attack. So a little in your face, but also like, a lot of candy and sugar on top of some spinach. And I think that that's the way that this topic was going to get digested the best. And so that's definitely where my heart was going into this.
The thing that I'm most impressed by is the fact that you started your own production company and you're basically producing money content, finance content that's geared toward women. So as a follow-up to what I just asked you, why not men? Why is it not that men wouldn't take your advice? Believe me, there's so much good stuff out there. I'm sure they're paying great attention to it, but there is a clear focus to women only. Why?
So I think with media, you have to know your audience. And if you try to be all things to all people, you're nothing to anyone. And I told you about a few proposals that didn't go through over 10 years to get my first book deal. And one of them was called Making Bank. And it was all things to all people, cool finance. And that would have been dead on arrival. For sure. And I think what Rich Bitch did was say, okay, I know exactly who she is. I know how old she is. I know what brands she likes. I know she is me. She's my former self. And the information is agnostic. I mean, I love finding photos of men who are reading Rich Bitch or Boss Bitch or whatever. And I post them a lot because I think they're amazing and hilarious. And a lot of moms who read it give it to their sons. Like if they want to hear me talk about, ex-boyfriend stories and be called a bitch, like get after it because the advice is for everyone. But I think in media, in order to resonate, you really need to know exactly who your audience is and you can't dilute that or else it just doesn't work for anyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that. No question. Know your audience and don't tell them what they need. Listen to them to find out what they will consume or what they're wanting. And clearly, you've found the perfect recipe. For our listeners out there, Nicole is the expert on many shows, many networks. Steve Harvey, you make appearances there. Access Hollywood. I mean, come on. I've already rattled off all these other networks. How in the world do you find the time for all this stuff? You even did a show called Hatched, where you're the host and it's a business competition show. So I don't know how you find the time to do all this stuff.
I think time is your most valuable asset. And this is coming from a money lady. You can always get more money. You can't get more time. And I think about that a lot. I actually have a tattoo that says that. I don't know if you can see it, but it's on my arm and it says there will be time. And I think about the idea of time a lot, and that it's a really limited asset, and that I want to be really proud of how I'm using it. So you kind of don't find time, you just make it. Like, it's not hiding under a couch. Like, I'll just find the time. Like, what? No, I don't think anyone in the history of the world has found time. you just make the time for the things that you deem important. And I think the more intentional I am about that, the more fulfilled, to use your word, I am.
Yeah, I love that word. I really do.
In addition to hosting this podcast, Kraig leads the Kann Advisory Group, focused on elevating communication for companies and individuals. Company consulting, empowering team and individual workshops, mind-altering webinars, and Kraig's inspiring keynotes for your conference or company meeting. They're all on the menu of services. Kann Advisory helps companies clarify their message, helps professionals build and showcase their brand, and helps everyone present their best selves. So if you're the leader of a team or company looking to give your employees a game-changing one-day experience, or an individual who wants to become a speaker and presenter that gets other people talking, visit CannAdvisory.com. And when you do connect, make sure to mention the Tracks to Success podcast to receive a special discount on any of the Kann Advisory services. That's CannAdvisory.com. Now back to the interview.
We're talking with Nicole Lapin. Spends a lot of time in New York, spends a lot of time in a lot of places. You talked about making time. You spend time with charity as well. And that's a pretty deep dive, and something that seems like you're pretty empowered and inspired to do. A lot of that also geared toward women. Among the many things that you've done, is there a charitable effort that you're most proud of?
Well, thank you for the question. It's something that I think about a lot. I actually started when I was starting my production company down the road of creating a 501c3 myself. And that's really expensive and really complicated. And I realized that there actually doesn't need to be a whole other charity by me, that I could contribute to a lot of amazing charities that already exist and probably make more of an impact. Like, I'm not in this for vanity. I don't need like another thing with my name on it. And so, Women in Need is dear to my heart. It helps women in New York City who are homeless, and helps with education and career services. I also have always been really passionate about kids' medical charities. And my father, growing up, was a doctor, and he was a brilliant surgeon. He was also an alcoholic and a drug addict. And so I think the dichotomy of public success and private pain has been branded into my DNA. And it's always been something that's really been important to me to honor and celebrate the good part of what I remember of him. Of course, there was a Jekyll and Hyde part, but the really powerful part has been important for me to celebrate and also see that part of what my upbringing was, because like everybody it's complicated. It's not all bad. It's not all good. And there are lots of shades of gray.
Your energy is one of the things that stands out to me. I don't know if you realize that that's one of the things that makes you you. And I say that as a compliment in talking about your brand and your entrepreneurship and the things that you've taken on, et cetera. What is your goal in helping people?
Wow. I think that for me, my purpose in the last, since I left network news, it's been almost a decade. My purpose has really been to empower women in a way that, I never expected myself to be, and having a platform, whatever platform I did, I'm not like delusional that I'm some Kardashian with this insane platform, but I felt a huge responsibility to use whatever platform I had in a way that I was really, really proud of. And so my goal is to just continue to grow that platform and to really be of service to others. I am 36 years old and don't have a family of my own. It's actually something that I wanted more than anything else. And I froze my eggs on Good Morning America. Like, I went through the whole process, and it's not been something that's happened for me. And, I think there's a lot of stigma around that, where, I didn't want to have kids. And then I really went deep into my inbox and to my soul, and I saw how many people I was helping. And I realized that, my life didn't turn out exactly as I expected, but maybe it's actually going to turn out better. And this was something that, I had to embrace for myself and find clarity and peace around. And I keep popping out these books, I guess, no babies, no actual human babies. And every time, I think I'm going to take birth control for the books, and I don't. I'm like, my tubes are definitely tied after this last one. And whoops, I just got pregnant with book twins. How did that happen? So if people want to keep listening and keep reading and keep talking to me, then I'll keep producing stuff.
I have figured out in our conversation today why you have become successful. And to me, it's not only because you're an expert in a given field, it's because you humanize it and you keep it real, and you don't shy away from tossing out the authentic you. Whether you realize that or not, that's what I see. Now, this podcast, Nicole, is called Tracks to Success. Are you proud of your track to success? Is there anything you would have done different, especially given that you opened up to me about a very difficult childhood?
Am I proud of myself? You know what? I'm not. I'm really, really hard on myself. And it's something that I'm working on. And it's something that I'm trying to quiet the mean girl inside my head, because I think from outward appearances, you think people have got it all together. And, the more I open up about the things that are taboo, whether it's money or mental health or fertility or stuff that people don't want to talk about, I'm kind of listen, I reached my goals early on. The rest is just gravy. So if I can do something legitimately beneficial to others, and I am able to say, I'll go first with these uncomfortable conversations. I'll show you mine if you show me yours, or don't even show me yours, but show yourself the truth. Then I think I win. But during my battle with burnout and a diagnosis of PTSD, I realized that I don't wish I didn't have PTSD that came with many, many rounds in the ring with darkness, and many, many, many episodes of severe depression, but also hyper arousal, which is the definition in the DSM of PTSD, which is not the sexy kind, but it's, this really intense work ethic and productivity. And I wouldn't be who I am today. And so I used to want to be so different. I wanted a perfect family, and I wanted to be happy all the time and proud of myself and all these things. And I think recently I just said, if I was different, I wouldn't be able to be talking with you today. I wouldn't be able to have the platform I did. And that was a big part of my last book, where I had to not look at it as my biggest problem, but my biggest superpower. And, it's something that I never thought I actually would frame it in that way.
Some great stuff right there. We've only got a couple minutes left. I want to ask you a few questions before we go, specifically about some advice that you would give. I'm sure you speak on many stages and platforms and groups, etc. Through this platform, what's the biggest advice about money that you would give anybody, not just women, anybody?
My biggest advice about money is to speak the language. And if there's stuff that you don't understand, then chances are a lot of folks don't understand it either. But that's, I think, the biggest impediment to getting any sort of financial life together is just speaking the language first.
Meaning to understand it when we're confused? Help talk me through that, speaking the language.
So yes, when you're confused, I used to, and I alluded to this earlier, like smile and nod instead of joining conversations. And I talk about that in my first book where, there would be conversations where people would say like, oh, shorting a stock, blah, blah, blah. And I would just be like, yeah, totally. I understand what you're saying. We've all been there, right? And you have no idea. But I am like super, super comfortable now. And even when I was on the air in business news, I would ask folks like, what does that mean? And I think a lot of people are nervous about that, especially in TV. I got to a place where I was like, listen, I know that I'm smart on these matters, and if I don't understand it, then the viewer's not going to understand it. But you kind of have to like really have some chutzpah to do that. And even in finance, like the bond guys wouldn't know what the equity guys would be talking about, and so there's a lot of fear around just asking a question because you think you might look dumb, but you're only being of disservice to yourself.
Yeah, you talked about burnout, and it's almost like overspending in a way, overspending of yourself to the point that you're finding yourself at a loss in a way. I'm sure you, as I said, speak to a lot of groups. So now I want to kind of leave them with this. The biggest advice you could give people who are either looking to become an entrepreneur or find their own path to success, what would you tell them given everything you've gone through?
Wow. I think that, I go back to the language thing again, because once I realized that like short is not the opposite of tall, it's the opposite of long, and it just means something's going in the pooper. Like it's not this exclusive club with this red velvet rope that I wasn't able to get in because I didn't have the pedigree. Then that opened up all the possibilities to me. And so I think that being able to be an autodidact is super, super important. So teaching yourself stuff, like, yeah, I went to fancy school, but like I didn't learn anything helpful there about television or finance or anything. Like, I still talk to people, and it surprises me the stuff that I'll hear. Like one guy said, I have money because I have checks. Like, this is scary, Kraig. The amount of financial illiteracy out there is something that truly does scare me. And I use a lot of humor to try and get the message out there. But if it's business literacy or financial literacy, it's okay if you don't understand it, but it's not okay moving forward.
Are there enough experts out there to help us?
I hope so. I hope there's more. I mean, listen to whoever you want. People will ask me all the time, like, what do you think about Dave Ramsey's whatever? And I'm like, I don't know. If that resonates with you, like, get after it. The truth is, if somebody tells you they're an expert in something, like, really run the other way. Like, I know a lot. I don't necessarily call myself a full-on expert. But there's always more to learn. I think that it's important to rethink conventional wisdom about everything, especially finances, and think for yourself. So don't take anything anyone says as gospel. Like, don't take stuff I say as gospel. It could be right for you, like to not buy a latte and, buy a house like other financial experts say, then great. I think it's that moment, like I became a vegetarian when I was younger, and my family ate meat, and I could have decided I really like meat, and so I'm going to eat meat, but I decided not to. But it's that moment where you say, self, do I like meat? Or self, is it okay to continue the way it's always been? And maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no, but don't just assume that because it's always been done a certain way means it needs to be that way forever.
Last thing. What's going to stand out from me of our little chat is the conversation with your agent and him telling you, or she telling you, you're blowing your whole career. And you said, just watch me. Now, you have hatched, I'm using that because you were on the show, hatched a lot of different things, a lot of opportunities. What are you most proud of?
Whew. I'm most proud of that I'm still here and that I'm still making stuff and I haven't been completely burned out or jaded or blown my brains out just yet. So that's what I'm most proud of.
You've done a wonderful job. You're a fun read. You're a fun watch. You're a fun listen. Folks out there, listeners, buy the book. And I hope you've bought into Nicole Lapin. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you. I can't thank you enough for the time. It really means a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Kraig.
In our conversation, Nicole and I talked about her show, Hatched, which is a business competition show. And that leads me to my one last thing. If you want to be an influencer, realize the importance of starting new projects and trying new things. The word hatched can be something exciting for you too, as you venture into something where you don't know the outcome, only the ambition and the goal of doing something great that other people might get some value from. A few months back, I hatched a weekly live stream career chat conversation called Elevating You, Reaching Your Peak. I do it with a business friend of mine, Mike Mooney, and for us, it was something new and an idea we were both passionate about as we try to give everyone who listens and watches something casual, yet some real conversation to help them in their own careers. Nicole has ventured into many spaces and inspired women to take control of their finances and their lives. So what's your plan? Time for you to take control. Start hatching some new ideas and building your own tracks to success. If you have a guest you think belongs on the podcast, tweet at us at Tracks to Success. Until next time, I'm Kraig Kann. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Tracks to Success, brought to you by Presentation Partners, visual storytellers passionate about connecting presenters with their audience. Don't forget to subscribe to the show for more great interviews and thoughts on reaching your highest personal and professional summit. You can follow Kraig on Twitter and Instagram using the handle at Kraig Kann. And for exclusive Tracks to Success content and news about our upcoming guests, you can find Tracks to Success on Twitter. It's at Tracks to Success.